What's up, fish friends? I made some big changes to this tank for some dwarf rainbows that I have in here that weren't very happy. So we'll talk about the difference between this scape and this fish habitat. Hey, hope everyone's doing well. My name's Michael with Fresh Flow Aquatics. This is my 45-gallon tall tank. I used to have it set up with a really open layout. I pumped a decent amount of CO2 in here, nothing too crazy, maybe like 20 parts per million, and then have a fairly strong light blasting on top using a little bit of fertilizers. For quite some time, my Gertrude's rainbows were doing well, all frisky, doing their little spinny dance, facing each other off, darting around the tank. But then maybe 4 months in of keeping them in here, they started to develop columnaris pretty often. I was able to treat most of them in hospital tanks and get better, but I did lose a few. And then it was a reoccurring thing. So, I started with all the usual suspects. I went over the water parameters, everything looked good. I was hitting all the things they needed in terms of pH, temp, flow, so on and so forth. I'm feeding them lots of great foods. I got some live grindle worms. I feed them live baby brine shrimp, lots of frozens, flakes. There's algae in here they can graze on. It's a pretty good diet for them. And I was kind of stumped at what the problem could have been. So I started reading more about their wild habitats. And the only thing I can really think of is that I figured that they would have enough vegetation just with this main column in there, but floating vegetation seemed to be like a really, really big part of their wild habitat. So I started slowly introducing some floating plants, and then you know how it works. They took over the top of the tank, and I let this rotala really fill in, growing up to the very top, and that seemed to really be the fix. I haven't changed anything else in this tank. We're still using the same amount of light. There's a ton of light going in there, but it's being absorbed by the stem plants and the floating plants. So, one good thing about that is that it helps to keep this tank more stable. So, it's pulling a ton of nutrients out of the water column, and as a result, I don't have to do as many water changes. And that's the only other major change that happened with this tank since switching over from like a aquascape to a kind of jungle layout. I haven't had to do nearly as many water changes. So I'm doing about like a 10% water change in this tank once a week, whereas before I was doing somewhere between like 30 to 40% every week, just under half. I can't really say for sure if it's like exclusively the floating plants or the water change schedule, but I do think those two go hand in hand. Anyways, that brings up kind of a fun conversation point for me is the difference between that previous layout and then the current layout. Does it make one bad or the other better? And I'd say no, not really. There are aesthetic pros to the first way I had this tank set up, but the problem was on me for not having done enough research on this fish. I thought that the Gertrudes would be fine in that kind of layout. I'd seen, other people keeping them in that way, but obviously I was wrong and fixed that mistake. But there are plenty of fish that do really well in that kind of a high energy system. Like my 75-gallon, for example, I got tons of glow light danios and what are they, Kubotyrasporas. They all thrive in like a far wider range of habitats or tank conditions versus dwarf rainbow species. So the point I'm making, I guess, isn't that you have to keep your tank one way or the other. It's really just, make sure you do your research on what kind of fish you're going to keep and what kind of habitat they like. It's kind of crazy how, for more sensitive species, something as small as floating plants and smaller water changes can make a world of difference. If you do want to end up keeping something a lot lighter with uh, tons of plants and, like the whole aquascape vibe, then consider keeping a heart of your fish. If you do want to keep some more sensitive ones like that, then just recognize that you're going to have to make some compromises on aesthetics. Not that this is a bad aesthetic at all. I actually really love the way this tank looks. I do miss the way that the light kind of shined down on the stem plants in the middle, but the floating plants also provide like a lot of cool nooks and crannies. It's fun to watch the fish swimming out of. Overall, I get a lot better behavior out of the fish, and I enjoy watching them a lot more and not having to worry about them being sick. So, um, yeah, let me know, what kind of tanks are you into? Do you prefer to keep high energy, high lit systems, or do you like to keep your fish tanks kind of like how I have this one set up now? Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Until next time, see ya.